Hello and welcome to Credit Versio's Q&A Wednesday live for June 23rd. I'm your host, David Michalek. Every Wednesday, we stream live to both our Facebook and YouTube channels at 6 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about credit and to answer your questions. Please take a second, introduce yourself, let me know where you're from, and if this is your first time joining us, welcome. I'm really happy that you're here. We're going to cover a lot of great material today. And I'm sure you know our credit report and scores play an ever-growing huge role in so many areas of our life. When our employers, insurance companies, landlord, mortgage broker, banks, credit card companies, you name it, when they're looking at our credit reports to see how we honor our obligations, you can see why credit reports are so important. Having great credit is mandatory because credit reports have become character reports. They're often referred to as adult report cards, and they tell the story of what we do when we are entrusted with credit. That's why we do these weekly live Q&A broadcasts, and that's why back with me today is America's #1 credit expert, John Ulzheimer. Let's play a quick intro, and then we'll get started.
John Ulzheimer is America's most recognized credit expert. With 30 years of experience in the credit industry, having worked for both FICO and Equifax, he's the go-to authority for answers to credit questions. Here to answer your credit questions, Credit Versio presents John Ulzheimer.
All right, John, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
We missed last week. We were just talking about your ascent to Everesting.
That's right.
Is it just so what it is just you just go back and forth until you do what would be the equivalent of climbing Mount Everest? Is that more or less the gist of it?
That's exactly right. So it was in Sun Valley, Idaho, and the height of one of the ski runs at Sun Valley, if you do it 15 times, meaning you hike up it and then take a gondola back down, if you do that 15 times, you do that the equivalent of 29,029 feet, which is the height of Mount Everest.
Wow. That's pretty ambitious. Very cool. Well, you know, I had a great Q&A last week. We had some of the regulars and a handful of new people. It was great. And today I thought we would talk about the subject that you did a video for us recently, the path to 850. So for those of you who are watching, maybe you're brand new, maybe you're a routine participant on our weekly Q&A calls. Every month, John does 2 short videos and also writes 2 articles, and they're typically based on subjects that we get asked a lot, either on Facebook or our customer service team here that fields some calls. And we post those at creditversio.com, and you'll see a section called Credit Coaching. So we have various authors. John by far has more material there than anybody else. And we have 2 new videos that I haven't posted yet. I'll post those probably in a week or so. But I love the subject matter. And, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about how do I fix credit? How do I do this? How do I dispute? But really, when we get on these calls, the agenda more really is to talk about how credit works, clear up a lot of confusion about credit scores, credit reports, and most importantly, how do we obtain great credit in a society that is so credit driven? And you only had about 7 or 8 minutes to do that video, which I thought was fantastic. Maybe today we can do a little bit of a deeper dive into the path to 850. Of course, a little bit of a disclosure which you make, which, you know, anything over 780 is kind of primo credit. But maybe you can start out with just some basics, maybe a mindset into a better credit score, things to pay attention to, and then we'll answer questions as we go.
Sure, and I like to break these down into kind of the process of the path to 850 versus the necessity of even trying to get 850. Yeah. And so you've probably heard the phrase or the acronym ROI, so return on your investment. And there's a certain point in the kind of the credit score scaling where there really is no more return on your investment, but people tend to love to hit 850 or shoot for 850. And so we'll talk a little bit about kind of the path to 850, and then the necessity of an 850, which is obviously not the same thing. So all of the generally used credit scoring systems in the United States, meaning those built by FICO and those built by VantageScore, have what's called a scaling. And a scaling is the range, the high end to the low end of the range. And so you'll hear, 0 to 60, 0 to 100 when you're talking about, acceleration. So there's really no difference with respect to the scaling of a scoring system. You have a low end and then you have a high end. The low end of credit scoring systems is 300. The high end of credit scoring systems is 850. That's the published range. So I use the word published on purpose because that's not really the range of every single variation of credit score in the US. There are scores built by FICO that have what's called a longer range, and so meaning that you can actually score lower than 300 and you can actually score higher than 850. Having said that, most people, if you think of what kind of the meaty part of the distribution curve, most people are going to fall well within 300 to 850, if not well within 650 to 750 is where most consumers in the United States are going to fall. So in order to earn an 850, you have to accumulate every single possible point that is available to you for that particular credit scoring system that the lender is using to score you. And so I think I'm gonna age myself a little bit here. I think of that Super Mario Brothers game where the little Super Mario guy. I think he's a painter. He's got a painter's hat, and
Plumber,
he's running.
I think, but pretty close.
Yeah. So he's running along he's jumping over garbage cans and he's jumping over pipes and he's going down ladders and all the while he's accumulating little gold coins, right?
Yeah.
And you'll get a lot of them, but you'll miss a few of them, right? And so when you get to the end of whatever stage it is, you've accumulated X percent of the gold coins. And you with your Donkey Kong. With your
I was just gonna say perfect timing. We're doing a video game analogies.
That's right. So in order to accumulate enough points to score the 850, you really do have to collect every single one of the gold coins that's available to you. If you accumulate less than all the gold coins, you're going to score something lower than 850. And that's really how credit scoring systems work. You have a variety of metrics within any credit scoring system, and within those metrics is a range of scores, or a range of points that you can earn or accumulate during the scoring process. And I'm making this up. So let's just say hypothetically that you can earn 50 points for the inquiry category and you earn all 50 of them. Well, that's great because now you've banked those and you're well on your way to 850. Let's say that you can accumulate 75 points in the time and file or age related metrics, but you only accumulate 70. That's it. Your journey's over. You can't score 850. It's impossible because you've already you've passed over some percentage of the gold coins and therefore you cannot have a perfect score. You could still have a killer credit score, one that's clearly good enough and well in excess of whatever every lender requires as their minimum scoring standard, but 850 is not in your future. Even if, now I'm going to break some hearts here, even if you accumulate every single one of the gold coins and you earn every single point that's available to you, you still may not score 850. And the reason you may not score 850 is because it is not systemically possible for every single credit score that's calculated to score that high. And the reason not is because within every credit scoring model, people always refer to credit scores, the model. Well, as it's like this one singular thing, and it's really not. A credit scoring model is actually a series of models, not a model which suggests that it's singular. There's actually a dozen or more models within every credit scoring system. And the reason there are so many different models is because each of those is designed to evaluate a homogeneous population of consumers. And so consumers they have one or two trade lines cannot be scored effectively the same way you score someone with 4 decades of credit experience. You cannot apply the same set of rules to those two groups. It wouldn't be fair to the people who have a tiny amount of credit. they qualify for a score, but you've got to evaluate them using a system and a standard that is built specifically for people who have thin credit files. And so because of that, there are scoring environments within every scoring model, within every credit scoring system that evaluates various types of thin files, various types of young files, credit reports that have bankruptcies, credit reports that have absolutely nothing derogatory at all, credit reports that have derogatory information, credit reports that have derogatory but not severe derogatory. So in other words, there's so many different environments, and it's trying to capture the ability to score every little homogeneous population in the United States fairly and appropriately. And so that's why it's impossible for every single group of consumers to score 850, because there may not be a upper end range in every single one of those scoring environments that'll get you to 850. I'll give you a really good example. So for those of you who have applied for a mortgage in the last 17 years, since 2003, actually to 18 years, since 2003, you have been subject to what's called FACTA, the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions Act of 2003. One of the requirements of FACTA is that you are given what's called a score disclosure notice when you apply for a mortgage. So every single one of you who has a mortgage loan in place, go look at your paperwork. Your closing paperwork is stacks about yay thick. I promise you, in that stack of paper is something called a score disclosure notice. And in that score disclosure notice are going to be the 3 credit scores that your lender pulled, and then some more documentation about the scoring model. And one of the things that's going to be included in that notice is the range of the scores. And so you would presume, oh, well, it's going to be 300 to 850, right? No, it will not be, because every single one of those scoring systems is going to have its own unique range that's going to fall within 300 to 850, but not necessarily 300 to 850. So you'll see things like, 385 to 831. So that would be the range for the scoring system that scored you, at the particular consumer. And so what it illustrates is that while it's really, really hard to score 850 already, because you have to basically collect every gold coin, there may be people who do everything right who cannot score 850 systemically, because the model that's being used to score them doesn't even have 850 as the top end of the score range. So your max may be 840 or 830 or 827 or something less than 850, still a killer credit score, but not 850. And so that's why this path to 850 is almost like fool's gold for some people, because for some people there is no path to 850 because your credit report simply is not voluminous enough and old enough to qualify for one of the scoring environments where you can score an 850.
That's making me really curious now, because back about that time right after FACTA, I think I probably bought 2-3 houses and maybe 1 or 2 4 units. So I got to go back, and shockingly I still have 2 big boxes with all of my, when you leave the title company or the escrow company, they give you that big packet when you buy your house. So I still have a whole bunch of those. I'm going to go through those and take a look. It's been a long, long time since I've been through any of that paperwork.
It's in there. I promise you. You had to sign it during the closing. The closing attorney probably made you sign one of them.
It sounds vaguely familiar, but of course back then I wouldn't have had the slightest idea of what any of that stuff meant, like I do today.
Sure.
Excellent. And that certainly explains why people see a limit to what their score is going to be. But as far as you're talking about ROI, I mean, what is the ROI on pursuing anything higher than a 760, 780?
Yeah, and look, you're never going to hear me tell someone you shouldn't try for a higher credit score. And the reason you'd never hear me say that, it's almost like saying, you know what, you probably shouldn't try to earn any more money every year. You know what you make, that's a stupid piece of advice. I would never give that advice to anybody. Shoot for 850. And if you only get 830, then hey, that ain't a bad deal, right? Calling that second place is almost an insult. So having said that, however, if you look at the best average interest rates offered by lenders for autos and mortgages, it's not at 850. And there's a company called Informa Research, and Informa Research basically surveys lenders every single day, every business day, and will accumulate and aggregate their rates by FICO score, by loan product. and this information is for sale. You can license a feed of this information onto your website. And what you're going to see is for every loan product, the highest tier, meaning the best interest rates, best average interest rates that are published by lenders, is not even remotely close to 850. For auto lending, it's 720, which is 130 points off a perfect score.
Yeah.
For mortgage lending, it's 760, which is 90 points off a perfect score. So as far as ROI, meaning if you're bouncing around at 780 to 790, sure, shoot for 850, but don't wait to get a mortgage loan or don't wait to go apply for an auto loan, because you're already going to get the best deal that the lender has to offer at that particular time. You don't need anything higher. And we're talking about loans. If you talk about credit cards, we're still talking about, we still have to say the same things. You don't need an 850 to get the best credit card that's out there. If that was the case, then you'd have credit card issuers with, a tiny amount of customers, because such a tiny percentage of consumers score 850. And just because you score 850 today doesn't mean you're going to score 850 tomorrow, because your data may change. Your credit card balances may go up. You may have a new inquiry. You may have an old account that falls off and your credit report looks younger all of a sudden. There's so many moving parts that you don't really have a lot of control over that influence credit scores. And so it may migrate in this score range, and that score range may or may not include 850 from time to time. So really, if you can get all three of your scores at or above 760, you're really already in what's kind of referred to as the elite zone of score ranges. If your scores are below 760, you're probably still going to get approved, but you may not get the best deal that the lender has to offer. And
one story you told me that I thought was pretty interesting years ago, this was at a summit, was not that this is a downside at all, but I thought it was kind of interesting that you had made a comment that that if you were to apply, if you were to apply for a department store card, that there was a high probability that you would get declined for a card like that. Maybe you can... For one of those special offer deals where you go into a retailer and they want to give you 10% off if you sign up for a card. And one of the reasons is, this is comical, but you could actually score too high for some of these card products. If you think about it, the only way that credit card issuers make money are fees, interest, and interchange. And for those of you who don't know what interchange is, some people call it the swipe fee. So every time you go and you take your card, and I realize we're in a chip world now, so you don't really swipe your card as often as you used to. You may just stick it in or tap it. But metaphorically, that's referred to as a swipe, meaning that it's a transaction. Every time you do that, the retailer or the merchant has to pay a fee to accept the card, and that's referred to as the swipe fee. And so even though you're not paying it directly, it's kind of built into whatever the price is of the product you're buying. So that's the way that credit card issuers earn money: interest, fees, swipes. And if you don't ever use your card, meaning that you used it one time because you were given 10% off of a kayak at some gigantic outdoor store, and you got your 10% off, and you take the card and you toss it into your drawer and you never use it again, well, that card issuer is making nothing off of you. Matter of fact, if you look at kind of the revenue line, you're below the revenue line, meaning that you're actually costing them money, because there's still risk associated with the extension of credit. They still may be pulling your credit reports from time to time for account management. There's a cost involved with that. They may be, sending you statements periodically with a $0 balance. There's a cost associated with that. So they're spending time on you, and you're not generating any revenue. So you're below the break-even line for them. So for that particular applicant, it's actually better for the card issuer to decline them than it is to approve them, because there's no upside unless you're actually using that card to buy more stuff at the outdoor supply store. So you can actually score too high, and not for auto loans and mortgages, but really for these kind of these private label retail store cards where you have, oh, by the way, every single time you apply for a card. So when you go to Home Depot is not a credit card issuer. Home Depot is a home improvement retailer. However, some bank has a relationship with Home Depot, and they underwrite and issue the credit card that has the Home Depot logo and the orange color. Well, every single time you apply for a card with a retailer, the credit card issuer
pays a bounty to the retailer. So they may get $50, $100, whatever the case may be. Well, there's an initial investment made by the card issuer just to open your account. A, they've purchased a credit report. There's a cost involved with that. B, they've spent time underwriting your application. There's a cost involved with that. C, they've created a plastic or metal card with your information on it and then delivered it to you somehow. There's a cost involved with that. 4, they paid the retailer the bounty because you went into one of their stores and applied for one of their cards. There's a cost involved with that. Saving 10% on a kayak does not make money for the bank. It makes money for the retailer. So you initially start way below the $0 break-even point on the revenue meter. If you don't do anything at all ever with that card again, you were a loss to a card issuer, just like you would be a loss if you charged something and never paid them back. A loss is a loss. Banks don't care how they make money. They also don't care how they lose money. It's binary. You either make money or you lose money. Doesn't really matter how. You either do or you don't. So that's why you see these kind of funny scenarios where you may actually go to a store and be such a darn good credit risk that you're not going to generate revenue, and so there's no point in approving you.
Yeah. I thought that was it makes total sense too. Oh, and probably a good time, now we're talking about credit cards, for you to just give a quick overview of a conversation you had one time with a credit card issuer of what an ideal credit card customer does and what their behavior is. Yeah,
so obviously credit card issuers are, like most for-profit companies, are in business to have customers and accumulate customers and have revenue and et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing wrong with that. The minute they make stuff free, I'll stop trying to earn a living. I guess that's kind of the perspective I have on that. So every credit card issuer, so American Express is an anomaly. Okay, so if you have bad credit, you cannot get an American Express card. They do not have a subprime I guess they have the prepaid Bluebird card, but that's not really a credit card. You're not walking around with a gold or a platinum Amex if you've got bad credit. It just ain't happening. But most other credit card issuers do have some sort of a tolerance for elevated credit risk, okay? Meaning that not only do they have really, really high level products, the things that with the precious metals associated with them, like the platinums and all that stuff, but they also have cards for consumers who have damaged or bruised credit or bad credit. So they've got really more of a buffet, if you will, of card choices because they want to do business and they think that they figured out a way to structure the terms of all different types of cards to make money on all of them. A card issuer would like, if you think of kind of like an Easter egg basket with all the different eggs in it. So some of the different eggs that would be inside of a card issuer's Easter egg basket would be someone like me. I've got really good credit and I never revolve a balance ever in like decades, maybe since college. So I make zero money for the card issuer in interest, but I use my cards like a madman. Swipe, 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 swipe. Everything that I possibly can pay for with my card, I'm going to pay for with my card. So I make a ton of money for them on interchange or swipe fees. But I don't make a dime for them in interest, and I don't pay late, so they don't get late fee income out of me. So that's one type of card user. No interest income, but a lot of swipe fee and usage income. And then you have kind of the other end of the spectrum would be the higher risk card user. So someone who may have a lower credit limit, may have a higher APR, maybe something in the high teens or low 20s or maybe high 20s. And they're using their cards, they're generating a large balance. So they're generating the swipe fee income, but they're also carrying a balance from month to month to month, which means that they're also generating interest. And interest it can be very expensive. It's called the cost to service the debt. It can be very expensive to service the debt on a credit card because credit card interest rates, even on a good credit card, are in the mid-teens, and on a good retail credit card, they're in the low 20s. So it's really expensive to service credit card debt. And then if you do silly things like try to go over your limit, or you pay late, or foreign transactions, or cash advance, then you're paying then you're paying all sorts of fees. And so, but if you never default, you are a really profitable card user. Even though you're paying all these fees and such, you're still a good customer in the eyes of the card issuer because you're generating a ton of revenue for them. So, and then you have the folks in the middle. They may carry a balance periodically, but not all the time. And they may use their card a lot seasonally, but not a lot during. And so they kind of fall in between me and then that other end of the spectrum. And so most card issuers like to have a nice mix of all those different types of customers because they're all generating revenue. And at certain points of time, they're going to try different marketing strategies for all these different types of their customers, right? They don't treat all of us the same way. So if I went 5 days delinquent on my credit card, I'm not going to have the collection guy banging my door down to remind me to make a payment. However, if someone who has credit scores in the low 600s goes delinquent, they're probably going to start getting emails and phone calls almost immediately because they're on a very short leash. So it's all very strategic and very well thought out. And banks pay millions and millions of dollars to consulting companies to kind of help them craft policies around these different type of risk profiles, which is why you do not see a one-size-fits-all credit card product except for Amex. But all the other card issuers really have a more complete product offering to really cover all ends of the credit scoring spectrum, except for the really, really low scoring consumers who are probably frozen out of the market, except for things like secured credit cards.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Jared, welcome. Glad that you're here. We're getting a little bit of feedback. That's okay. So I know John and I are talking about reaching that upper level of high credit, trying to get into the 800 score, and then we talked a little bit about credit cards and how they behave. If you have any questions at all, feel free to jump in, ask. We'll answer questions even if they're off topic. The Q&A session is for you, and John and I are here to answer your questions. So jump in if you have something that you'd like to ask about credit. And until we have that, John, maybe we can talk about some good practices, some habits to get into on that path to let's just call it 850, but anything over 760, getting into that upper level. And one thing I wanted to throw out there, the reason why I want to talk about good habits is a recent development with Jennifer. This is my girlfriend. So yesterday, pulled her credit report because there was something on there that was a little nebulous. I wanted to take a look at, and then I realized that she was currently 90 days late. Her score had dropped 100 points, 90-something points, and it was on a Capital One card. And I called her up and like, hey, babe, do you realize that your score has plummeted and that you're currently 90 days late on a Capital One card? The reason why I'm bringing this up is this is a card that she thought was closed years ago. She doesn't have the card physically. She doesn't have the app on her phone. Not even though I'm in the business, she's not one to look at her credit report on a routine basis. So I thought, well, this is kind of a perfect example of a storm of things that went wrong. Not keeping an eye on. And fortunately for her, she made a call to them, and very, very lucky. They were very understanding. They removed everything and gave her a new card. That was part of the agreement. Is okay, you got to take your physical card. And I told her, listen, as soon as that card gets here, you're going to put the app on your phone. And I don't know about you, John, but one of the things that I do, like I'll just show you real quick on my homepage for those watching. If you look at the top, I don't know if you can see this. Oh, no, it's too blurry. But this top line right here, bank and credit cards app, every single one of them. And I look at them 2 times a week, maybe 3 times a week. I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with knowing what's going on with credit. Now, maybe you can add a little bit into that as far as good habits, but I thought that would be an important one to bring up because that's a case study of this is why you got to watch this stuff. Even a card that you thought you didn't have or haven't used, done no transactions. What it was, John, it was as I'm sure you already know, it was an annual fee.
The annual fee, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so most credit card issuers will have will give you the ability to set alerts so that any transactions are greater than some dollar amount are going to trigger a text. I mean, I get text messages almost constantly from almost every single one of my credit card issuers when I'm using those cards, or when some auto bill is being applied to it, or if my son's making in-game purchases on his PC playing some game, and I'm like, what the heck is all the $19? And he's like, oh, no, I take that out of my bank, take it out of all the money. But my point is, that's right. I mean, we live in an era right now where there's really no excuse to not have to take advantage of those things. That's why they exist, right? The card issuers want you to know, because the last thing that Capital One wanted to do was waive whatever fees that she charged Jennifer, even though it was the right thing to do. That's not generally something that card issuers like or want to do. So, that's something that I absolutely take advantage of. Another thing that would have saved the day is, there are tons of free credit monitoring services out there. And if you've ever been the victim of a data breach, which is every single person who's watching this right now, then you probably were gifted some credit monitoring service by the company that was breached. So I take advantage of those a lot. I have credit monitoring ad nauseum. I'm constantly getting alerts. Thankfully, they're all false positives. But that's another way that you could have seen a new balance on an otherwise inactive card, or a delinquency that was now a 30-day delinquency rather than it going to 90 days. And so, been able to address it much more on the front end of the curve. So I like all of the tech options that are out there that are, by the way, that are all free. There's no cost associated with any of these things. So, it's just like, it takes up a little bit of real estate on the face of your telephone, and otherwise that's kind of it. So I like taking taking advantage of those options. To the extent that she doesn't want that card any longer, and Cap One's fees are generally not that high, $79, $129, something like that, which is not even a good bar. It's not even a good bar tab. Let's be real honest about it. In the grand scheme of things, it's such a tiny amount of money. For cards that I have that do have those really low dollar annual fees, I leave them open, because there is tremendous value to the unused credit limit that's worth $79 a year. And to the extent that I need a Visa from time to time, because wherever I'm shopping doesn't take Amex or doesn't take Discover, then at least I have a backup that I can use once every 2 or 3 months, and it's still an active line of credit. And to me, that's worth a pretty low dollar annual, and even a high dollar annual fee. Like I've got an American Express card that has a $495 annual fee. And there are people that would hear that will react exactly like you just reacted. Wow. But if I told you,
I want to hear what you get for that.
That's the answer to the question is, well, what do you get for that other than saying you have an American Express card? Well, I could care half a baloney about that. What do I get? What is the practical value that I get out of it? I get a companion ticket on Delta. That's $495 right there, depending on where I'm flying. I get Sky Club access. That's another $400 and some odd dollars. And if you're a frequent traveler, that is a really big deal, because that's food, that's booze, that's internet, and that's clean bathrooms.
Yep, they're fabulous. I love that.
They're absolutely fabulous, and they're at almost every airport. And upgrades, meaning that I buy coach tickets and I upgrade into first class when I buy my ticket. And the value of that is unheard of. So for $495, I'm getting thousands and thousands of dollars worth of stuff. Right. So I don't focus on annual fees. I know some people like to, whenever you read blogs about how to pick a credit card, you see some really silly things like, pick the ones with the lowest interest rate. That's a horrible idea. That means that you have essentially waved the white flag and said, I'm going to carry a balance on this card. I'm giving up immediately before I even apply for it. I'm going to revolve a balance, which is the most expensive thing you can do with a credit card. So you're looking for a card that's going to cost you the least of, I never ever look at the APRs. I always look at the rewards programs, because I'm not going to revolve a balance. And to the extent that is an optional thing to do. No one is forced to carry a balance. So that's generally, I know, how do we get from balance alerts to how to pick a credit card and annual fees?
We're all over the place, but I think
it's almost like the inside of your body. Everything's kind of all tied up together somehow.
Scotty's got a question here. I've opened about 8 credit cards to help build up credit, which has actually seemed to work, and only use 2-3 cards a month and pay off right away. The others I keep zero balance. Is there a rule of thumb on how often I should use them so banks won't close out the account? Great
So,
question. Let me just pop that up there one more time in case somebody is seeing that for the first time. Great
okay.
question, Scotty.
So my advice to Scotty is I'm going to quote a famous commercial: lather, rinse, repeat. You are doing nothing wrong. Keep doing that. You kind of sound like me. I only use a few cards, but I've got a lot of them. It acts as credit score insurance for me. There is no general rule of thumb with respect to how often you should use them to make sure that the card issuers don't close them or lower your limits, but you do want to use them from time to time. The card issuer can decide for themselves how long is too long. So what I like to do, Scotty, and just make sure that you stay on top of this, is, pick a month out of the year. And let's say that month you're going to use one of your Visas for dry cleaning, and one of your MasterCards for a tank of gas, and one of your other Visas for dinner. So just put them on a revolving door type of strategy to where they all get some sort of usage periodically that resets the clock of activity, and it acts as an incentive for the card issuer to ignore you when they're focusing on what accounts they want to close because of inactivity. Now, if I'm reading your question correctly and I'm kind of inferring something here, I keep a zero balance and I pay it off right away. I don't know what that means. Pay it off right away. If I were you, I would pay it off online before you even get your bill, because then that way the statement you're getting at the end of the month is still zero, and the credit reporting is also zero because that's based on your statement balance, not your actual balance at any particular point in time. But you're still getting the value out of using the card. You're still getting the fraud protections that all credit cards have, fantastic fraud protections. And you're also accomplishing your goal of making sure that the card issuer doesn't close the account because of inactivity. So really, you're doing everything right, and you're getting all the benefit out of doing everything right, and you're having no credit score impact because the balance never shows. I call that the ethical credit score hack, is you're using your cards and you're paying them before your statement closing date. I do almost exactly what I just said, but I do it with more than just 2 or 3 cards. I do that with a whole lot of cards, but I'm very strategic about it, and I don't ever let more than 2 or 3 accounts on my credit report appear with a balance, because I'll stop using one for a month, move the usage to the other, and then move it back based on the rewards programs that I like the most, and then do the lion's share of my shopping and usage with those cards. But I absolutely do throw a little bit of love to those secondary and tertiary cards, because I do not want them to be closed from out from underneath me.
Couple of things, John. I do almost the exact same thing. I've got, I think, 5 cards, but my main card is my Cap One Venture card, because that's the one that's got the best rewards. And I typically don't revolve if I can help it. But Discover, my Visa cards, I'll throw something on them once every couple of months or so. Interesting. We did before I was with Versio with another a very large credit repair company. We did do some analysis at what point, what age do inactive accounts on credit cards tend to close. Now, granted, this is a group largely they're going through a credit repair process, so the scores aren't great and they're high risk. So this isn't really a model for everybody. But we would see the highest percentage of close rate between 12 and 18 months of inactivity. So I don't know if that's something to live by, but for people who have scores in the 5s and the 6s, maybe that number increased a little bit during the COVID pandemic, because as we talked about, John, there were occasions where people saw credit limits being decreased, inactive cards being closed down because lenders are trying to offset some of their risk.
That's right.
So I think a good rule of thumb is, probably don't leave a card sit too long without a balance or activity for more than a year. Throw a little something on it, maybe fill the gas tank up or whatever.
That's right.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a ton of spending. It doesn't have to be a big balance.
Yeah.
Just throw a little bit of love to the card issuer. Use the card. You're not paying anything. You're generating swipe fee income. The merchants are paying them, not you.
Yeah.
So it's stuff you were going to pay for anyways. Gas, dry cleaning, groceries, dinner. You're going to pay for that stuff anyways. So might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone as far as the usage goes. And yes, you're right. So your analysis that you did, 12 to 18 months, there's also the the economic influence. So that happened a lot during the 08, 09 meltdown.
Right.
And it also happened again on the front end of COVID. And for people who
Yeah.
had really good credit, this wasn't isolated to people who have bad credit. And so you could do everything right and still fall prey to the credit limit decrease or the account closure simply because of economic influences that are outside of your control.
Rick had a question. This is when we were talking about the American Express benefits. Does that work for car rental? Rick, I think that's what you were referring to. If you want to elaborate a little bit, if you still have that question, then we can answer that for you. Let's see, Scotty. It sounds like a plan and helps out a lot. We'll do that. Great. Okay. Rick, Ms. David, thank you. Credit Versio works great. Really explained everything on my credit reports. Thank you so much for great education. Rick, glad you're here with us. And then Tata Bell, should I close a secured credit card once I get unsecured credit cards? Oh boy.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, the general rule and the smart advice normally is to not close credit cards because of the value that you get from the unused credit limit. A couple of things with respect to secured cards. Number one, if you got unsecured cards and still have secured cards, that means you still have money that you have given the card issuer that is locked up in that secured card, because that's why it's called a secured card, because you paid money to secure the usage of the card. So that's number one. You may want your money back, but you're going to have to close the card, or they may convert it to an unsecured. So if you've got good enough credit now that you're getting unsecured cards, then you may be able to convert the card to unsecured, but not actually close it. That would be option one, Tata, if I were you. Closing it should be the last resort. Having said that, most secured credit cards have a few $100 credit limits. It's unusual that you see a secured credit card that has several $1,000s of a limit, because that means you've given them several $1,000s of your money. So when you're closing when you're closing a secured card, normally you're closing a card that really has a credit limit of only a few $100. And in the grand scheme of the math, the utilization math, that may not be that big of a deal. But again, if you like the issuer, if it's like what I call a name brand issuer, and they're willing to convert the card to an unsecured card, maybe give you a higher limit at the same time, which is kind of a win-win, and give you your money back, then that would be option one. If they say no, then you do have to consider the alternative, which is, do I want them to keep my $500 for the secured card, or am I ready to move on because I've got other things? Here's what I would do. If you're going to choose to close it, don't choose to close it a week before you apply for a mortgage. Close it when you're in what I call credit no man's land, which you have no applications coming up anytime soon. You don't care if your score goes down a few points, because there's really nothing that you're going to be buying anytime soon. At least that way it gives you an opportunity to A, see what the impact was to your score, and B, the time to react to the impact, meaning that you didn't do it just before you applied for something and now you're like, well, great, now my interest rate's higher because I just closed this silly secured card.
Yeah. And I think maybe you touched on this, John, but I know we've talked about this before. Another thing to take in consideration, especially when people are out of the credit game for a long time, say they went through a bad period of time, that they're not touching credit. It's been years. Things have fallen off. Things have been deleted. They get that secured credit card because they're ready to re-enter the credit market. And years down the road, that's the oldest piece of credit that they have on their credit report until they start getting unsecured lines of credit, and maybe they get a car loan or something else.
Yeah, keep in mind, and this is kind of identifying a pretty common credit scoring myth. Just because you close a card doesn't mean that you lose the value of the age of the card. As long as it's still on your credit report, if you have a 10-year-old secured card, even if you close it, you still have a 10-year-old secured card. In fact, next year you're going to have an 11-year-old secured card because it continues to age even after it's closed. You see a ton of articles written about how if you're going to close your accounts, don't close the oldest ones. That's irrelevant. It's not relevant, the age of the account. What is relevant is that you lose the value of the limit in the utilization ratios. However, what the credit bureaus will do is they all have policies that they'll delete inactive accounts after a decade. If they're negative, obviously they have to remove them sooner because of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But if you have good accounts and you close them, then they're going to remove them. They're going to remove them after 10 years as a matter of policy. But by then, everything else on your credit report is 10 years older as well. So it's less of an issue. So again, if you want to close it, fine, but just be aware that you're going to lose the value of the limit when you do so.
Great answer. Yeah, that's that one that comes up a lot because I think that people get a lot of bad information and they think, oh, if I close this, I lose the history, and not the case. Okay.
Only when it comes off your credit report do you lose total value of the card.
Okay, so we have another question from, okay, I have 2 closed cards from 2 years ago with a balance on them, and my FICO is counting them towards my utilization. Should I pay them first or get new cards first?
Let me read that. I have.
Yeah. Oh, let me put up one more time.
That's okay. I can see it in the comments. I have 2 closed cards from 2 years ago with a balance on them, and my FICO is counting them towards my utilization. Should I pay them first or get new card? Yeah. So just for clarity, my FICO is a website. It's not a credit score. My FICO is is FICO's consumer direct website. Their credit scores, them to utilization, that makes perfect sense. Just because you close a credit card doesn't mean that the balance is all of a sudden, ignored by credit scoring systems. It's not. It's still considered in your score. So I don't know what's your strategy. I mean, if you have 2 credit cards that have balances, you have interest on those cards, and that's very expensive. And so I would work to pay your balances down as quickly as possible. Because if your strategy is just to open a bunch of new cards to help to kind of dilute the impact of the balances, then you're chasing utilization, which is what you're doing, which is very expensive. You're eventually going to fall into a scenario where you can't get a new card. So my advice would be pay down the cards first, get their balances to 0 or close to 0, and then your utilization comes down and you're saving money at the same time.
Okay, I think most everybody got that. There's about 20 seconds.
Yeah, everybody's frozen. I think I'm frozen.
Yeah. It looks like you're good now. Okay. All right, we'll work through it. So hopefully that answered your question. If you need some more clarity, then just post again.
And of course, really funny.
Okay, the Diva Productions. Uh-oh. Well, we lost John there. Let's see if he'll ring back in here. The Diva Studios. One more time here. Should any accounts and collections I'm not sure what. Rephrase the question if you would, please. I paid 1 collection account off, and it just got deleted off my credit report. That's great. That's normally not the way things work, but if you paid it off and it was deleted, then great. Okay, and Diva, your next question: how many points do you get when you get a collection or a chart of deleted? It doesn't work that way. In fact, there we go. John, you're back.
I am back. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I just covered 2 questions real quickly from the Diva Production Studio, but the third question that I just put up, I think, is perfect for you. We've answered this one before. How many points do you get when you get a collection or a charge off deleted?
Yeah, so that's not how credit scores work. Specific items don't have specific values, meaning nothing is worth 10 points, nothing is worth 50 points. Your score may not go up at all, depending on what else you have on your credit report that is problematic. Your score may go up. It may go up a modest amount, depending on the age of the collection. So there's really if anyone gives you an answer to that it has a specific point value, they're giving you an incorrect answer. So the best way to find out how much removing a collection or paying a collection is going to influence your score is to do it, or pull your credit report prior to you doing it. Then you'll have what's called a pre-score, and then pull it again afterwards, and then you'll have a post-score, and then you can see the difference in scores, and you can probably attribute some of the difference to the fact that you either paid off a collection or you had a collection deleted.
Yeah, it's not an easy, fast and hard rule for any of that stuff, Diva. Okay. Oh, you know what, Diva? Let's do this. Let's get to Cecil first. Experian Boost, any benefit to using it? I had a bill drop off, and it ST the points.
Lost. It says lost in the comment.
Oh, does it? Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Boost definitely works. Experian's not lying with all those commercials. If you look at some of the statistics on their website, I think scores have gone up by several million points collectively from all the people who have used Boost. The yes, to the extent it's called a boosted trade line. To the extent a boost trade line causes your score to go up, if you shut off Boost and they remove the boost trade line, then it would make perfect sense your score would come down. Your score didn't go down because of it. Your score just went back to what it was prior to you adding the boosted trade line. I did the same thing. I wanted to see if it worked. I wanted to take the consumer experience. I wanted to be able to write about it from the first person perspective. And I did. I had my natural gas bill and I had my power bill. And my score went, I think, like 4 points, which is great. And then I shut it off and my score reverted back to whatever it was prior. So it definitely works. I mean, they're not allowed to advertise that it works and they can't knowingly be dishonest with you like that. So it definitely works. But I want to be really clear. It has its limitations, and its limitations are that it only works with the more contemporary FICO and VantageScore credit scoring systems, and it only works at Experian. Meaning Boost doesn't do anything for your TransUnion or Equifax credit reports because it's an Experian only offering. So it's fine. I like it a lot, but it does have those limitations. So please keep that in mind.
Okay, and let's wrap up here. Where are we? About 50 minutes or so. Last question. Hi, should I pay any accounts in collections?
Yeah, this may have been one of the earlier ones we had.
Well, she asked a question that was similar. She's like asking how many points would she get by paying off collections, and now the question seems to be just asking straight up, should she pay accounts in collections? I'll put it back. Of
course. Here. I mean, if you owe money and they're legitimate debts, you should pay your debts. You're on the wrong webcast if you're looking for advice to not pay your debts. You're never going to hear that coming out of my mouth.
Well, I think what gets confused a lot, because we do have a lot. Probably the majority of the people that are here, I would say, are using Credit Versio, are trying to go through the repair process, and there is a lot of bad information out there where it's like never pay. Like even if you Google put collections in YouTube, it's like how to never pay collections. Because I think the belief is, and again, this is not something that I agree with. This is not something that John agrees with. Is that
no?
Well, hey, it is factually, it is an accurate statement that if you do pay a collection, that unless it's a contemporary FICO model, or correct me if I'm wrong, John, or a contemporary, by contemporary I mean a newer, like a FICO 9 or FICO 10, that if you pay the collection, apart from those models, that there really isn't a score benefit. Now that's separate from talking about what is the right thing to do. Well, obviously the right thing to do is to honor any debts or commitments that you have made, regardless of, if it's gone into default. If you have an opportunity to come around and make good on an old debt, then that's of course the thing to do, even though there's a possibility that there is no score benefit in that scenario. I think that's really where questions like that originate from, John.
Yeah, I guess I don't even, when I get a question like that, I don't even think about credit score or credit reporting. I think of, do you owe it? And if you owe it, you should pay it. And
Absolutely.
anything that's in collections means that the other creditor with whom you actually had a relationship didn't get paid. So I'm from the school of thought that good things happen when you honor your obligations, whether they're obligations that you think are now fair or unfair. Paying collections has so many benefits. First off, pretend like it was your money that wasn't being paid back. Would you want to be paid back? Of course you would want to be paid back. It's your money. Number two is while it may not result in any credit score improvement, it's also going to result in the debt collector not suing you and garnishing your wages, which you can't ignore. It's also going to avoid the default judgment following you around for however long it around. And it's also going to stop the communication between the debt collector, and meaning no more letters, no more phone calls. So there's so many good things that happen when you take care of those third-party collections that really have nothing to do with credit score. And to the extent that your credit score goes up because you've paid or settled a collection, then that's what I would consider to be kind of icing on top, or the cherry on top. But yeah, I'm, the answer is universally yes to the should I pay my obligations questions, for me anyways.
Yeah. Tata, we're almost done here. Is it a good idea to add a trade line to your report, even if it's only for 3 months?
Well, I don't know what that means. Add a trade line. I mean, if you open an account.
I'm pretty sure what she's talking about is like buying a trade line. Tata, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a strategy that's used a lot when people don't have a deep credit file and they're trying to get qualified for a home. Buying trade lines is kind of a, it's a pretty popular thing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can't answer yes or no from the kind of the morality or the from that perspective. I can tell you that a trade line on your credit report that was not there yesterday, regardless of how it got there, I don't really care how it got there. But if you have a trade line on your credit report that wasn't there yesterday, then certainly you have to reconsider what the credit score is going to be today versus what it would have been yesterday. And to the extent that that trade line is, old, has a high credit limit, has been paid on time, has a low balance or no balance, then obviously these are things that are generally helpful for a credit score. So from that perspective, having something new hit your credit report can certainly be helpful.
Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap up with this one. Lorenzetta, is it normal when disputing inquiries for none of them to be deleted on all 3 credit reports when using Credit Versio? Lawrence, it doesn't matter if it's Credit Versio or you use a letter template or you write a dispute on a paper napkin. If the creditor or the data furnisher is able to verify that the information is accurate, that it is your inquiry, it's going to stay. The dispute process does not mean that something is going to be deleted. Accounts get removed when they're erroneous, outdated, incomplete, or unverifiable. And if it's really your inquiry, it's going to stay. If it wasn't your inquiry, then that's an entirely different situation, and you can add to your comment below, and they can take that off of the Facebook Live. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an inquiry on your credit report that you didn't cause, that means you've been the victim of fraud. I mean, someone's applied for credit in your name, and a credit report has been pulled without your permission, and you have bigger problems in the inquiry. You have potentially a fraudulent debt that's now in that exists, and someone is either driving a car and they think it's you, or living in a house and the lender thinks it's you, or has a credit card and the lender thinks it's you. And so the inquiry, if you don't recognize an inquiry, then you probably have been the victim of fraud.
Yeah. That's, again, kind of goes back to the beginning of this conversation when we were discussing what are good habits to get into when trying to achieve a higher credit score. And one of them, as you mentioned, John, is there's no reason not to have a monitoring service. There's so many of them that are free right now. You can get your credit report free at annualcreditreport.com. I think it's every 2 weeks. Is that right?
Every week from all 3 credit bureaus through April of next year.
Yeah. So April 2022, you can always get a free credit report. Now, if you've got a Credit Versio account, you're going to either have Smart Credit or you're going to have Identity IQ, which are paid monitoring services, but they need to connect with Credit Versio. Both of those will provide you with alerts, and you can see your any kind of activity on those as well. Okay. Lauren said, okay, great. Yeah, she says she's got a fraud alert on all her accounts. So that's excellent. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me and John today. It's been our pleasure to talk to you and answer these questions. John, thank you so much for coming on board and doing a Q&A with me. And then we'll be on again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.